Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics Show. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is the rise of freight orchestration with GoodShip's Derek Netelenbos. How's it going, Derek?
It's going great, Joe.
So, Derek, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
You bet. First off, thanks for having me, and hello, everyone. My name is Derek Netelenbos, and I'm the VP of Partnerships over here at GoodShip. And I am calling in from the Pacific Northwest, Bellevue, Washington, to be exact, where we also have a product development and engineering center that we recently opened up here about 4 or 5 months ago.
Very nice. So what do you guys do over at GoodShip?
Sure. So at GoodShip, we help transportation teams make better freight decisions by bringing procurement, analytics, pricing, and execution intelligence all into one place. And putting that all in a wrapper, that's the orchestration piece of it, bringing all of these disparate components together. And what this allows our customers to do is move from a kind of reactive, fragmented decision-making approach to a more timely, coordinated, data-driven execution of their freight network.
Yep. And who are your customers?
Our customers, we started back in 2022 with a focus on shippers, helping shippers better understand their network. And last week, we announced officially that we're expanding into helping LSPs, so asset-based carriers and brokers, do the same thing. But on the other side, shippers, we help them with, one of the components is running efficient, accurate procurement events. For LSPs, we can now help them respond to those procurement events in a much more concise, efficient manner with better intelligence.
I like it. I like it. Before we hit the record button, we were talking, and I told you that when I was at a little 3PL, we created a carrier scorecard. So it had each of the carriers we used. It was mostly less than truckload. Some sort of cost measure. I think it was cost per mile, which isn't exact, but it's directionally correct. Some on-time performance. I like to measure billing accuracy, especially for LTL. And damage freight, what percent was damaged? Obviously, 99% should not be damaged. And I remember wherever I went after I was there, I would use this carrier scorecard. And people would always say, oh, see our TMS? We can do that automatically. You don't have to create that Excel spreadsheet and cut and paste it into PowerPoint. I was like, and after a while, I started saying, incorrect. Theoretically, you can if every field was filled out properly and it was updated the way it was supposed to, but that's just not the way all of our systems are. We have, not only do we have a lot of different systems, but we don't always have every I dotted and T crossed in the system. And it's not the transportation management system or the warehouse management system. It's us pesky humans who use them. We put in incorrect, inaccurate, incomplete, wrong format, whatever it is, it'd be great if I could spit this out of my systems. TMS is from, and by the way, I guarantee somebody's listening and probably going to ping me and say, we can do that. But the problem is, it's not only just that we get the information incorrect within those systems, there's a lot of systems. And do I want to pull from my order management, from my freight audit and pay, and from the visibility solutions? Somebody's got to pull all that information in. And in the past, I know what I did. I asked my clerks to do it. And it was hard work and thankless. So you guys are doing that very difficult work automatically.
Yeah, it's the foundation of all of the functionality that we provide in the platform. Data is the underlying component that supports everything. So we normalize the data, we bring in data from the systems that the shipper and now carrier and brokers use, and orchestrate it in such a way so that it's updated regularly, it's normalized, it can be accessed, and more importantly, it's continuously reviewed for potential insights to improve your network performance. Historically, as you mentioned, you could do that, but the only way you could do it was by allocating more employees to do it, manually generating more spreadsheets, importing, exporting, creating pivot tables, you name it. highly manual and highly time consuming.
It feels very bad to have a really state-of-the-art transportation management system or an ERP where you say, oh yeah, it's excellent. And then I download everything into an Excel spreadsheet, present it. And just as bad in the past, and again, I know we get better every single day, but it's to say, oh yeah, we have this automatically generated report out of our TMS, but since the people using it didn't necessarily enter in all the information or the system didn't receive a ping from saying it delivered, it's just an incomplete report that someone has to follow up with.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not that the TMSs are not providing value. I think where we're at now with technology, and I mean, we're all aware of the rapid deployment of AI, it's becoming more and more unstructured. And so when you look at software and UIs, you're really limited by what has been coded and what has been developed.
And when you say UIs, you mean the user interfaces?
User interface, correct.
Yeah, the weak link with these systems is all of us. And I used this analogy earlier when we were talking about it, is data is gold, obviously. Good data that we can use to put it in the AI to get even better information and better insights. But it reminds me of like mining gold in a river that you see in California in the 1840s, where you got a whole bunch of gravel that you're trying to sift out of a few small flakes of gold.
Yeah. No, every one of our customers, anybody who's shipping or moving freight for shippers, they have a unique data footprint. And that data footprint is their historical operating history. And within that historical operating history, there are countless insights and new insights being developed every day that business is in operation. And historically, there's been no way to thoroughly comb that historical operating history, that data, to pull out where could I be doing better? Where can I make improvements?
Yes. It's interesting, as data is the most important thing. We all want more and more data, but you guys aren't just collecting the data and putting it in a spreadsheet or in a system. You're improving it. So when you're working with people and you hand back the data, it's not just, hey, they just gave me my data back. No, they gave your data back in a much better format, in a much more accurate, much more useful.
Yeah, I would say we normalize it. Out of the box, GoodShip comes with probably a dozen standard KPIs that most of our customers will use. But when we deploy and we onboard a new customer, we go through a rigorous process of understanding, okay, what are unique KPIs that you want to track and measure? And we incorporate those into the dashboard of the platform.
Yep. And we'll discuss a lot more of this in a minute. But I think there's another aspect of it. If you're a large shipper, and I know you guys work with very large shippers and also the mid-range shippers, mid-market, I should say, they might have a whole bunch of different systems they're pulling from. So I say, one of my carriers has this system and another carrier is using a different system. And I work with a broker on some of this stuff. So I'm getting it all in different formats from different things being measured, not useful. So I need some orchestration layer, an intelligence membrane, if you will, that says, okay, we're gonna make this make sense. Tell us a little bit about you, Derek. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the juggernaut that is GoodShip, and why did you join?
Sure. I am the son of two European immigrants. Their families immigrated to Canada. I was born in Calgary, Alberta, and then ended up here in Seattle, Washington, as a result of my parents visiting the World's Fair. They fell in love with Seattle. And so I've been here my whole life, went to the University of Washington, avid Huskies fan.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, go Dogs. And yeah, really have enjoyed everything that the Pacific Northwest has had to offer. Fortunately, for the last 20 plus years, it's been a hotbed of innovation with all the different companies that have come out of the greater Seattle area. Don't have to mention them. I think they're household names for everybody. And really what got me into logistics was early in my career, I was in sales management and then progressed into more of a partnerships role, corp dev role. So I was a sales manager, led a 100-person team at Expedia. And this was all in digital advertising. So digital advertising was
Oh,
really
that was
getting
hot.
hot.
Yep.
Yeah, it was hot. And led a global team at Expedia. And what I quickly realized was I didn't like being that far away from the front lines, wanted to reel it in a little bit, joined Groupon's corp dev team and partnerships. And a couple years into that, there was a startup here in Seattle getting a lot of attention called Convoy. And
Yeah, I know those guys.
yeah, they continue to make a little bit of news and joined Convoy in 2019 to help launch the partnership team there. And it's been logistics ever since. We all know what happened to Convoy. So post Convoy, I spent a little bit of time at Metaphora, which is an industry consulting firm. And then just prior to joining GoodShip, I was at Parade, which was in the news this week. So
They just got acquired, right?
they just got acquired by Mudflap, yeah.
I never heard of Mudflap. I looked them up yesterday when I saw that news.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be an interesting marriage there. Mudflap has access to a lot of what I would call the long tail carriers, and Parade, to a certain extent, they're really more in the load matching and getting loads covered for brokers. And so I think that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. But in any case, yeah, I knew Ryan and David, the co-founders of GoodShip, from my days at Convoy, because they were both at Convoy as well. And the origins of GoodShip really came out of some of the problems that Convoy was encountering when we were going to bid on these big RFPs for large shippers, right? So everything that GoodShip is today was spawned out of the problems and the pains that we were encountering at Convoy when we were responding to RFPs.
Yeah, these problems are still out there. And we didn't really touch on it earlier, but if I'm going to do RFPs, I need to be able to pull my data together. And it's never been easy. And I always remember when I was at a 3PL running into this, where somebody say, "Oh, we want you to bid on this work," and they were using brokers and carriers who would not give them or did not have all the information. So when you ask for historical information, you get 80% of it, 70% of it, and then you're guessing on the rest of it. And it's no way to run a railroad. Again, we all recognize the importance of the data, but we still know our data is not quite up to speed. And again, the weak link is usually not the systems, it's us.
Yeah, I think we all intuitively and professionally know what would be the best thing to do. Then it just boils down to resources, or how do I get access to that? And the RFP example you mentioned is a great one. And so if you think about how RFPs are typically run, it's a big spreadsheet and you get some lane volume. If you're lucky, you're going to get some information about, is there any seasonality? But historically, it's just been, hey, here's the volume, and straight line it across the year. What we do at GoodShip is, because we have all that data for the shipper, when a shipper initiates a procurement event through GoodShip, that procurement event, when a carrier or broker starts to look at that lane information, they're going to be able to see, okay, what was the seasonality of that lane? When are these loads typically picking and dropping? If they're picking on a Friday, dropping on a Monday, and it's a one-day haul, there's going to be some cost considerations in there. So being more transparent about the actual freight in that RFP is going to result in a much more resilient, much more accurate and stable price from the people responding to that RFP.
Yes. And the RFP, the ability you guys give big shippers and now also carriers to do better RFPs enables them to do more RFPs. And I think this has become an industry standard. Traditionally, we've done RFPs every year. And the problem with that is, let's say I'm a big shipper and Derek, you're a big carrier. And I say, Derek, I need you right now here. We're talking on April 17th. I need you to bid on all these 1,000 lanes for the next year. And I give it to you. Maybe it's not quite everything you needed, but I give it to you. And you go, how in the world am I going to come up with what prices will be a year from now? So you could do one of two things. And I don't know what the right answer is. You could say, I'm going to be really aggressive. I'm going to win this business. and Joe's going to love working with us. And even when I have to go back and maybe say, Joe, we were too aggressive. Can you give us some money back? And now you've ruined you've sullied the relationship a little bit. Another thing you might do is go, I don't want to get Joe's business if I can't actually fulfill it. So I'm going to go fat and happy on all the quotes because I don't know what's going to happen next March. I don't even know what's going to happen in 3 months. How am I supposed to guess what's happening in 12? You guys now have made it so easy to go back out with these RFPs with good data, better data than we've ever had before. Now I can do it for a season. I can do it every quarter, which I think is a fair way to do it because I'm not asking you to see around a corner if I'm just saying, what do you think is going to happen in 3 months? And you're not taking massive risk of overcommitting.
Yeah, it's 100%. And if you think about historically the annual RFP, I think it was largely limited because those events, depending on the size of the shipper, let's just say an enterprise shipper, that could be a 3 to 4 month endeavor.
Oh, it's painful.
And let's be clear about what you get out of that. When the RFP is done and awards are out, you're at the starting line, right? So the end of the RFP is really the starting line of execution. And then it's monitoring and making sure that carriers are in compliance, performance is in compliance. There's a number of things to keep monitoring. We've added a DC or we've got some weather events, whatever it might be, every one of those becomes another event that has to be managed. And when you're doing that manually, it's time consuming and very often you can miss the mark because you're too late. Not because you weren't aware of it, it's just you couldn't move any faster.
Yeah. And also, if I, as the shipper, award some business to Derek, some to this guy, some to that guy, and Derek's performing really well. Him and his company, they get it. The lanes their lanes they've been given are solid. But maybe some other people are falling down a little bit. And I say, you know what? I'm going to go back out with another bid because it's easy. I can do this easily. In the past, it was like, we locked in for a year. And the people who are stumbling on their lanes, maybe they would love to give those up. And maybe they just weren't a good fit for their network. And I don't want to wait a year. Why would I wait a year when something's not working? The reason we waited a year before was because it was like such a painful process to do RFPs. And I always think about the way we did them in the past is you send an email out to every business card you had that said carrier on it or 3PL. And you sent them an Excel spreadsheet and said, put your prices in. And when you raise your hand and go, hey, could I get a little extra information? No, because that wouldn't be fair to the rest of the 100 people I just sent this to. And the business I win, and by the way, I've done this. I've been the fool. I've done this at a carrier. We win certain lanes and you go, oh yeah, yes, we won 10 lanes. And then what you realize afterwards, God, I thought we could make some money on $1,200. Turns out we can't. And I remember you start to realize the reason I won this lane is because I was the dumbest person out of these other companies. They all realized no one goes from Baltimore to Midland, Texas. And I remember my ops guy calling me one day. He goes, I'm talking to carriers based in Midland, Texas, who don't want this business. I was like, did I screw up? So we've punished the carriers for participating. It's not fair to them. It's not doing you any good to have a whole bunch of carriers saying, great, I make $5 per load with these guys. I don't care if I lose it. I'm looking for a more profitable lane anyway, and I'm going to drop this business like a rock as soon as I find something better.
And Joe, that speaks to why we felt it was so important to expand into the carrier and broker side with our application. Because if you think about, we'll call it the marketplace, right? The buy side, the sell side. And at the end of the day, a healthy marketplace is not a marketplace in which one side is extracting all of the value. It's not a zero-sum game, right? So when our shippers are providing more transparent information, more detailed information, when their scorecarding systems are their scorecards are automatically generated in GoodShip, and the carrier can see it at any given time, and it's going to be identical to what that shipper sees. True, accurate information exchange is good for all participants. And so when we started with the shipper, it was about making sure that shipper's data was true, accurate, transparent, so the carriers and the brokers could accurately bid, which was resulting in a more stable, more resilient routing guide for those shippers. Now we're giving this analytic and orchestration application to those that are responding to the RFPs, so they in turn can make better pricing decisions. And what do they say? It's rising tides lift all boats. And that is certainly the case in this marketplace. It should not be one side wins. There really is an opportunity.
I look at good data and a good, whatever format it's in, that's the beginning of a good conversation. If I don't have good data, I can have discussions, but it doesn't take me as far as having good data does. And I think most carriers and most shippers, they want a win-win relationship. And I should say win-win and win because of the shipper and the receiver. We want those relationships. I always think about this. I had one shipper that I worked with, and we would have our weekly meeting with them to go over our carrier scorecard. And about once a month, the lead would call me and say, "Hey, just want to confirm that we're a good customer." And I was like, "You're a great customer." And you know why? Because you call me. She says, "Are you making money? Are we a more profitable account?" And I go, "Yeah, you're right up there." And God, how often has that happened in your career? Not many times. And when there's a shortage of trucks or drivers, it's all about driver appreciation and trucker appreciation, carrier appreciation. I'll post something on LinkedIn saying I love my carriers. They don't see it, but my my LinkedIn groups do. But really, if you love them, if you want to work with them, then treat them well and share the data and be comfortable with it. I don't think we have to hide anything. I think more and more of where we're heading is towards transparency. I want to know what your true costs are, and I also want you to make a buck. Because I know you won't be here for long if you don't.
Yeah, we're all in it to make a buck. Well, and you won't be there for long, or you're going to underperform. And then as the shipper, if you're not sharing that data, participants of that RFP are going to make potentially a poor decision or mistakes, and your routing guide falls apart. We feel very strongly about this, and I think it's going to really help all participants in that marketplace better appreciate, better service, and create a more resilient environment for the shippers and a much cleaner way to work together. One thing I wanted to mention real quick, though, you went back and one of the things you said, you were talking about, we got a carrier here, we can't find a carrier, or there's something going on. Think about post-RFP, right? So post-RFP, you're at the starting line, and now it's about execution. What we've introduced is historically you'd have to go and dig for data or see exception reports on a very specific aspect of a load, whether it's on-time pick or delivery or contract acceptance or tender acceptance. Because we're bringing all this together, we surface those insights automatically. So when the folks using our application day to day log into GoodShip, they're seeing anything that's anomalous, whether it's performance related, contract related, cost related. And earlier this year, we rolled out Laney, which is our AI transportation analyst. And you gave the example of maybe I should move some of this freight over. What our customers do today is they say, hey, I've got a carrier that's underperforming. What would happen if I moved all of that freight to other carriers? Please recommend which carriers to move it to and the implications that would have on my network. Laney's going to think for 20 seconds and give you a very detailed response on the implications, the number of loads impacted. It is phenomenal.
So Laney is Laney. I looked it up the other day when we were prepping. And that's an AI agent?
It's an embedded AI agent, which basically combs all of the data that we have orchestrated. And this is why I go back to the data is so important. If you think about the first iteration of GoodShip, it was bringing all this data together. sorting through the data, normalizing the data. Now that you have all of this data, it can be consumed by Laney. And so now you're not limited by the prompts and the drop-down menus in the software or the UI. You can ask your data via Laney all of these unstructured questions.
Yeah, as long as it's all in there. So one of the things we've always talked about is tribal knowledge, which is contextual. You know it because you've been dealing with it. I know it because I've been dealing with it, but I can't convey what I know easily to someone else. As soon as I get good data, now I have Laney, and no one says she has she. We call her she.
We call her she.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does she call herself? Anyway.
Very, very smart is what she calls herself.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you put all the data there, it's not necessarily a tribal decision. It's a decision based on data. We can still apply our tribal knowledge against it, saying, okay, what Laney doesn't know is blank and blank, but increasingly she's going to know more and more. Now, let me ask you a question. There's always attachments in emails and Excel spreadsheets and PDFs. Can you guys ingest that stuff too?
Yeah. In fact, one of the things that we take pride in is that from contract signing to deployment, we're anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. And it's because we have taken the approach, because it's the fastest way to do it and it's less complicated. Much of the data that we ingest is flat file. And so we're bringing all of that data in. So whether that's we're scraping it from an email or it's the files being sent to an FTP server, we can pull it in through flat file.
Yeah. I got a call from a friend of mine. He's a vice president of logistics at a large shipper. They spend $100 million a year. I'd done some work with them. And I remember him calling me one day and he goes, how long are we going to tolerate emails in our process? And I was like, what? He goes, this is years ago. He goes, we have this system. Everything's supposed to go in the system. But you know how it works is you were going to move that for me, Derek. And there was a problem and the rate went up $100 and you updated in the system, but you also sent me an email saying, hey, Joe, just to confirm our conversation, the price went up for this reason or whatever. You might have put it in the notes or whatever, but a lot of times it was a conversation or an email, maybe even a text. And what he was getting at is we have a system of record and yet we're working outside of it all the time. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. And I was like, obviously you want to update the system, but sometimes there's context that's outside the system. And what he was saying is, I don't like it. I don't like when you get $100 million, there's a couple $1 million worth of other stuff that's outside the system.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's the reason we also integrated communications within GoodShip and contextual communications. So if I see, let's go back to the example where we want to maybe remove an underperforming carrier and have several other carriers pick up that slack. Then I can now tag that and flag it to the rest of my team to operationalize. And it'll always reference back to those action items. So what was once tribal knowledge is now cataloged and all of the historical information. And you can go through and see who took action, who it was directed to, and then actually see what was the insight that drove this action, all within GoodShip. You can additionally communicate with your carriers through GoodShip.
Yeah, I always remember I had a very good customer and they trusted us. And then at the end of the year, we were pulling together in spreadsheets, mind you, all of the shipments we'd done and all of our performance, and we were self-reporting, but they trusted us because they tracked us for a long time. And at some point they said, we trust you because you are more strict about the on-time performance than we are. We're very proud of that. And at the end, my customer said, oh, by the way, I'll have to get it to you. Probably did 10 flatbed moves. They were kind of local to our factory. I'll get you that information. I go, wait, what? Did you go through us on this? She goes, no, just a local guy. And I was like, now my metrics are all blown up and now I'm asking you to give me those bills so we can put them in here so I can know year over year what's going on. And I remember thinking, and I said to her, I'd rather do those shipments for free than have them be outside my system. And that's I wasn't lying about that. It was such a blow up to our numbers. And it happens all the time. That's just the way, that's life. We work outside systems. I'll throw another one out to you, Derek. Every once in a while, you'll hear somebody say, you'll have a broker and they have 3 monitors, right? They got 3 monitors. This one, I'm checking a visibility tool. This over here is to make sure that none of our carriers are uninsured or fraudulent. I am connecting all 3 of these. I am the power source here.
Yeah. This is doing the orchestration.
We're pointing at my head right now, my giant melon. And that's not what we're meant for. That is not what we're good at. And then at the end of the day, a whole bunch of your information that should be available to Lainey is in my head. And I am, again, the weak link. And we need to get our people out of deep dive in execution and raise them up a little bit and say, hey, we can start to make better decisions, not trying to save $50 on a load today, but saving 5% and doing a better job with my partners. That's not possible in our current, without the tools.
Well, that's what AI totally unlocks, right? Let's leverage AI for the deep dive analytics, because as the employee, we know what we would want to accomplish. We can think outside of the box, but historically we've been prevented or maybe even not encouraged to do so because we have so many repetitive, mundane kind of process tasks that we have to go through that there just isn't time in the day. So basically what Lainey does is, hey, let me pick up the slack and be those 3 screens behind the scene, aggregate all this data, and you know what? You launch a bunch of questions at me, make them complicated, think outside the box, and I'm going to go through that data and help you come up with some solutions.
So every day there's new technology that provides some new data. So fraud prevention became a big part of our business these last 5 years. I'm assuming there's fields for that in your system. There's all sorts of visibility tools. I might want to connect to MacroPoint or Project 44 or a dozen others. That all has to be able to pull in. Obviously, I have ocean data. I have all sorts of data that I want to pull in. Every day, are you guys growing this, I don't know what you call it, the orchestration layers that get bigger every day?
It does. And that's a large part of my role here at GoodShip is reaching out, working with other third-party technology providers that have a place at the seat in these shipper and LSP tech stacks and bringing them in so better decisions, better insights can be surfaced. So you're not looking at 3 or 4 different monitors and trying to make quick decisions in your head.
Right. Derek, you might remember during COVID, we talked a lot about the whole idea of digital twins. And the whole premise behind that is every single action that's taken from my supply chain from order to cash, there is some sort of data record, and I can track that. I can use my digital twin, what actually happened in the real world. So ideally, in a perfect digital twin, it completely matched. I think if you think about Waze or Google Maps, that is a digital twin right now that we use every day. You can't do a digital twin with your TMS alone or with your WMS. You need the order to cash, all of the data all in one place and some sort of system that allows us to do that. I don't think most companies are particularly close to it, but what can happen over time is you say, I have this shipment that originates in Shanghai. It goes to Long Beach. It gets picked up here and eventually delivers to my factory in North Carolina. I can start to map those and then do scenario planning after I have a certain amount of data on it. We can't get there with a whole bunch of disparate systems. It's just not going to work. We need some orchestration layer like what you guys are providing. And I'm not saying you guys are necessarily providing that just yet, but you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, we're certainly looking at mode expansion. Today it's FTL, some intermodal. We support a little bit of LTL, but
Bigger every day.
Our product roadmap for the rest of the year has mode expansion in it, and there'll be announcements.
Yep. Yep. You did just make an announcement about why you moved into carriers. So you've traditionally worked with mid-market and enterprise shippers, done well in that. And again, I don't know if you can mention names, but I know of big companies that are using it. And then you guys just decided we're going to start working with carriers. And you're also working with 3PLs?
3PLs and brokers, yeah.
Okay. Explain that.
Yeah, so it goes back to a little bit of we're at the top of the conversation. So GoodShip, when we first launched it, yes, the focus was the upper mid-market enterprise shipper as our customer. As our customer, though, some of the things that we deployed for them facilitated communications with their carriers and brokers, right? So we have this notion of an automated scorecard. So when a carrier or broker is servicing a GoodShip shipper, they're going to have an opportunity to log in. They're going to get credentials for their instance of GoodShip, and they're going to see their scorecard for that shipper. And they can look at it anytime they want, and it's going to match what the shipper sees. So going back to that weekly scorecarding call, there's no reason that a carrier or a broker should not know where they stand at any given moment from a performance perspective with their shipper customers. One, we got a lot of great feedback from brokers and carriers saying, hey, this is so great. We don't have to ask for the scorecard. We don't have to ask how we're doing. We see it real time. Additionally, we have that communications component within GoodShip where the shipper can action specific things to the carrier through GoodShip. So now what you're getting some of these carriers and brokers receiving emails that are coming out of GoodShip, and they like the context that's being provided behind that because they're understanding what's being asked of them more now. And then on the RFPs, as I mentioned earlier, when a carrier or broker is responding to an RFP, they get a detailed view at the lane level of, they're going to see a seasonality chart. They're going to know pick times, drop times, days. There's so much detail in there that it makes for a much more accurate response, right? So now the carrier is not saying, well, we better pad this 20% because we don't know what day of week it delivers. We don't know if it's all in one day. There's 100 loads a week here, but is that all one day? Is it spread evenly? So we're giving all that information to the carriers and brokers. I share all of that because with the carriers and brokers interacting in GoodShip in this manner, it generated a lot of inbound, hey, what are you doing for carriers and brokers? This is really cool. These are the simplest RFPs I've ever responded to. We love seeing our scorecard whenever we want. And ultimately over time, largely through word of mouth, we had a couple brokers see GoodShip. We just demoed it to them and they said, wow, I could really use this.
Right. Oh, I believe that. And let's face it, there's a lot of different ways to do business. 20-some percent, 25%, whatever it is, of shippers decide I want to use a broker. And by the way, some are using brokers for certain lanes and carriers for others, and they have their own logic to it. But I can see where brokers would say, yes, this is what I want. And I think the best part of using a broker is they're the ones who are going to judge the carriers, and they're going to manage those carriers. Not so long ago, I heard somebody say this to me. They said, well, we did a good job. Our carrier that we picked didn't. I go, that's what you're paid for, is to pick the right
that's
carrier.
Your job. Yeah.
I go, they're like, yeah, but sometimes I go, no, full stop. You are my procurement company for carriers. You select the right ones, manage them in a way, pay them, and I'm completely satisfied, or you failed, not them. I didn't contract them. You did. I hate, you don't hear it very often, but when I do hear it just makes me crazy because that's all you're being paid to do is to manage the brokers. But let's face it, they do a really good job where they say, hey, this carrier is struggling on this lane. Let's swap that out with somebody who's a little stronger in that lane. Maybe that other carrier is better in some other lanes for us.
And I think we also need to acknowledge the fact that the broker, they probably have the hardest role in this marketplace, right? Because they have to manage the expectations of the shipper And then they also have to manage the performance and tune the carrier. So they're smack dab in the middle, definition of a broker, right? And some of the things that we're building out for them is going to make it much more efficient, again, pulling in all the data. So if you think about a broker, they're going to want to know how their carriers are performing. We're pulling all that data in. We're going to pull in all the rating information. We're going to pull in their benchmarking rates, regardless of who they use, and bring that all together so that they can make accurate and sound pricing decisions when they respond to RFPs.
Yeah, and I know it's overused, but you're the single source of truth. So when a carrier's talking to one of their shippers and say, hey, we're disputing any of this. This is the system that we're using. And we both agree that this information is fine. And we'll go back and see if there was some sort of error in connecting. But before I forget, you guys have a platform I'm sure I can log into. Can I also pull GoodShip into my TMS or my ERP or my order management? How's that work?
Yeah, I'd say it's less about pulling it in and it's more about GoodShip can extract data out. And you said something very important, the system of record, right? Source of truth. So our goal is less about being the system of record or source of truth. We are going to pull from those various sources of truth, right? So your TMS should be the source of truth for your routing guide, tender acceptance, performance-based information, your vetting solution or your compliance solution. That's going to be the source of truth for insurance and various other attributes of the carrier. So we don't claim to be the source of truth. We aggregate and orchestrate the various sources.
Yeah, you're not
of
the
truth.
source. You're the format where it's, because the source is the TMS we pulled from, or
But to your
VMS or
point,
ERP.
yeah, we integrate with any TMS and we can do it very easily. We work with the large TMSs that have ERPs attached to them. We can pull data from ERPs. We can pull data from WMSs. We can pull it from freight and payment systems.
If it has data, you can pull from it.
We can pull from it, and then we can get creative, again, on the APIs, the KPIs. We probably have a laundry list now across our entire customer base of 200 plus KPIs that include what comes out of the box, but also what our customers have asked for us to develop for them on their behalf. And then it shows up as a KPI on the dashboard.
I love it. I told you earlier, I have a philosophy that only the very best metrics grow up to be a KPI.
Yeah, I love that.
I never liked when somebody says, hey, here's a report, and it just measures these 36 metrics. Useless to me. Anyway, I want to summarize what we talked about today. Then I want to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Derek Netelenbos, a nice Dutch name there. And I'm about the Rise of Freight Orchestration. And GoodShip was created to pull all this information from all your sources of truth into a nice format that you can use to begin the conversations and also measure accurately. So we have so many disparate systems. It's not just our TMS that we're pulling from. It's now we have visibility solutions. We have all the freight fraud stuff. So important that we have that. The insurance information, the compliance information, the information in our business just seems to grow by 7 fields every year. And none of us would say, yeah, don't add any new fields. We knew the freight fraud fields, super important. The compliance ones, the insurance ones. This is a very difficult business, and the information lets us do a better job. But there are PDFs that are attached to emails. There's emails that have valuable information. There are Excel spreadsheets. I always remember in the little 3PL I was at, every morning I'd see my people opening up Excel spreadsheets so they could cut, copy, paste into our TMS. We even got faxes some days. And I was like, where'd we get this fax? 1995? I don't even know there was such a thing. Anyway, all this information, plus we had gotten to a mode where it's almost heroic to have 3 monitors up that I'm looking at each one of them. We're not meant for that. We are not good at multitasking. Let the systems and then GoodShip pull all that information into one place. Then they also have Laney. Laney is the agentic AI that will do a lot of the heavy lifting. And if we get all the information in there, she can do a much better job than any of us can. This also lets us do RFPs a lot easier. We used to do RFPs once a year because it was like a root canal. You did it because you needed a year to recover. And that was very difficult on the carriers because they can't see around the corner. They don't know what's happening the next year. And we've been in a market for a long time where people said, this is the year it recovers. I don't know how people sit down to do RFPs. I think the better way is to say we're going to do them every quarter. We might even just do a short one for Christmas. We might do a short one just for the summer. So we have the ability with GoodShip to be able to do RFPs a lot more often and also with a lot more information involved. Then also measuring post RFP when we're actually watching execution. If somebody's falling down, we don't have to wait a year to make a decision. Let's put them out of their misery. Let's put us out of our misery and do another RFP for the struggling lanes. You guys started off working with enterprise shippers and the mid-market shippers, and now recently have started working with brokers, 3PLs, and carriers. I know they'll love this because they're the ones who are often creating this data for their customers. Anyway, enough of my blather. Put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic, Derek?
Well, big old bow. Joe, you said this earlier in the conversation, and I think it is the best way to sum it up. Every shipper, every broker, every carrier, every 3PL, you all have an incredible asset at your disposal. It's your data. Your data is gold. What needs to happen is you need to get that data brought in, normalized, orchestrated, so you can start to extract the benefits, the insights of that data. And that's what really GoodShip is all about. First step of the process, bring the data in, normalize it. What's important to you? How do you run your business? We customize the KPIs the way you want to see them. Unleash Laney in the application. And then that's going to also elevate the performance of the folks that are on the front lines. They're going to be able to get strategic and ask really compound, sky's the limit types of questions because they don't have to focus on the day-to-day grind of manual processes and tedious tasks. So GoodShip is a real unlock from a data and kind of advancing the business. So that's where I'll leave it, Joe.
Yep. What I'll do is I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website. Any other links you and Celine give me, I will put in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you. This just seems like a slam dunk. There's a lot of technologies out there that are, by the way, we're going to end up with a few new technologies in the next few years anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And each one of them says, here's new data. But if I don't have a way to pull all that data into one place so I can actually make decisions, as opposed to, I got a little bit of information in my TMS. I guess I got a little here from a report they gave me. I'm not capable of making good decisions if I don't have all the data in front of me. And as much data as we create, it's not always in front of us in the format that we can use.
Oh, yeah. Hidden. You lose the credentials. The person who pulled that report's no longer with the... Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing. Thank you so much. Again, I make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, any other links you and your go-to-market team give me, I'll put in the show notes. What conferences will we see you and the fine folks from GoodShip at this year?
Yeah, so I know we're going to have some presence at Gartner,
Nice.
I think Reuters,
Nice.
most likely
CSCMP. Nice.
Yeah.
That's down in Nashville.
Yeah, and then after that, I think there's going to be some regional events, but we'll get loud on LinkedIn as more of those become finalized.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time, Derek.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.